Hey everyone, I'm Mind, and in this video I'm going to be comparing the two different Ninjago Combiner Mech sets. This one on the left is set number 71765 Ninja Ultra Combiner Mech. The entire set had 1,104 pieces and retailed for $89.99 in the US when it first released back in 2022. And then the one on the right is the all-new set 71834 Zane's Ultra Combiner Mech, which contains 1,187 pieces and will retail for $99.99 in the US when it officially releases on January 1st, 2025. This one was gifted to me early for review by the LEGO group through the LEGO Ambassador Network, but of course all opinions expressed in this video are entirely my own. In this video, I'm only going to be comparing the main builds of this mech. I'm not counting side builds or minifigures that come in those sets, but if you want to see more details about either of them, I do have full reviews of each of them up right now on my channel. For Zane's mech, that's a brand new review I did just this week. For the original combo mech, the video is about 3 years old at this point, but if you're interested to go back and watch it, you can. Both videos will be linked in the description below and in the pinned comment. But anyway, I wanted to take a look at these sets in this video because I think they're both some of the most technically impressive Ninjago models that have ever been released. Of course, this one came first, so I'm interested to see what improvements the new model made, how they actually stack up against each other, and which of the two sets is actually better. In case you didn't know, the whole idea behind the combo mech is that it is one mech that splits up into 4 different vehicles. So we're going to start by looking at both of these in their mech form, then seeing how each of them transform, and then finally comparing those transformed vehicles. So right off the bat, there's a couple pretty significant differences between these two builds. The original combo mech is taller than the new combiner mech, but the new combiner mech is a lot more bulky than the original combo mech. The combo mech seems to go for a very mechanical look with very thin parts in some places, while the combiner mech seems more armored, high-tech, and even a little more cartoony. When it comes to the way the legs are attached, both mechs do it in a very similar way. They connect with these rigid Technic joints and they have enough room to move exactly one notch, but then of course the entire leg can also kick forward and be moved back the other direction. On the combiner mech, you can see that's exactly the same. It can move in and out exactly one notch, but then there's a huge range of motion on the leg, both forward and back. However, while the legs connect in a very similar way, the feet are quite different. Here on the original combo mech, there's a little bit of movement side to side on the ankle. That allows the foot to be flat on the ground, even when the mech's in a wider stance. But then if you want to bend the foot forward or back, it has these double rigid Technic joints. I'm really not a huge fan of that on the feet specifically. It does help with the transformation, but in terms of posing the mech in its mech form, that's not the best. Comparing that to the new combiner mech, the feet are very different. The legs are a lot thicker and come very far down, almost touching the ground themselves, but then there's these smaller feet on ball joints that protrude out the front, and these actually do a good job to keep the mech balanced and standing up. There's also two other things that really help with stability here. There's the tires on the side and these little rubber pieces underneath the feet. These just create a little more friction against the ground, so if the mech is standing up and it starts to slide outwards like this, both the rubber tires and those rubber pieces underneath will sort of get caught, so that way the mech will stay standing up and not topple over. Comparing that to the original combo mech, yeah, the bottoms of the feet are entirely plastic, so depending on what surface you have this standing on, it can be very slidey. Those rubber pieces are something they started doing in recent years. I forget what the first mech was to do it. Most mechs nowadays, though, have some sort of tire or rubber piece to create some friction, but I believe this one was made before LEGO started doing that more broadly, so I don't entirely blame this set for that, but yeah, that was definitely a positive change in recent times. Speaking of wheels on the sides of the legs, on the original combo mech we have these treads right here that are on the lower ankle, and the ankles in their entirety are white to match Zane. There's two different seats right here where you can place minifigures. This one is where Zane's supposed to sit, and then this one was for the Woobot in the set. I don't have the figure with me right now, unfortunately, but the Woobot had a little stud shooter on his head, so he could be a turret shooting out from the knee, which was a ton of fun. And I don't have the original Zane minifigure that came in the set on me right now, but here's one of the new Zane minifigures for demonstration purposes. He could be sat down in the leg like this, and then he closes his windshield up around him, and that way he's piloting his part of the back. Coming back to the new combiner mech, in place of those treads, we have these giant wheel pieces on the upper leg as well as on the ankle. While I do think the treads on the original are really cool, I like how these go all the way up this leg, and there is 2 windshields here that can open up again. This one has a little turret built in, just like the Woobot on the original. However, this time it is aiming upwards instead of downwards, and on a similar note, the minifigure in this set does go in upside down. The legs become Pixel's car, and this ensures that she's facing the right way when it's in car mode, but I will say it's a little bit silly to have her placed in there like that, though she is a robot, so I'm sure she doesn't mind. Of course, things can close back up with her in there, and unlike the previous combiner mech, you can no longer see the minifigure while she's in there, and I'm in two minds about that. On the one hand, I think it makes this build visually a lot stronger because you can have this really cool graphic on the leg instead, but I also think there's something charming about actually being able to see the minifigure in the mech, so there is a little bit of that that's lost here. Now when it does come time to separate this mech into its different parts, the two legs connect in the center to form one little tank. But because of that, they have these Technic pins on the inner legs, which are definitely not the best looking. When this set first came out, I was very understandable of that. It was a trade-off, right? You had to compromise compromise a little bit in terms of looks for the functionality. But the new Combiner Mech does something very similar and does a much better job of covering it up. You can see the inner legs here are actually completely textured. There's like a little bit of Technic you can see, but I think it's a good use of Technic. It just makes this feel like an actual mech. It looks like that could be machinery. It's not overused to the point where it looks ugly. And then there's just a very tiny connection points at the bottom of the leg. There's a Technic axle that sticks out a little bit in 2 clip pieces, and on the other leg there's an axle hole and 2 bars. I think that's one of the biggest improvements with this mech compared to the previous version. With the previous version, it was very clear it was meant to be a Combiner Mech. There was a few compromises in a few places, such as the insides of those legs. With this one though, the mech feels very complete. It doesn't seem like too much was sacrificed. Back of the legs on this one, there is a lot of anti-studs, but I feel like this is a tasteful use of anti-studs. It would have been nice to see them covered up, but I feel like the colors work fine. They don't look bad here at all. On the original Combo Mech, there's a lot of anti-studs too, and it's definitely not as nice looking, but once again, this is far from the worst case of anti-studs I've seen. Just feel like it's a little bit flat in this section. It would have been nice to have a bit more texture there. It's alright though, both of these are fine. The bigger thing is this on the back of the legs right here. These are the feet of the Kai Mech, which is one of the parts that separates from this build. But to combine into the full mech, they tuck away at the back. I actually have them slightly backwards. It should be more like this. There we go. And I think this was a smart way to go about it. These look like they could be like little thrusters or something. It does make a decent shape that integrates somewhat naturally into the mech, but I will say the new one just not having anything like that definitely looks a little bit better. The torso on the original Combo Mech I think looks good. I really like how the C-bound blade pieces are integrated here. It feels very sleek and high-tech. There's these 2 smaller arms that come off the sides and one of them holds a sword, and they actually have some pretty good posability to them. They connect on a ball joint, so there's a pretty good range of motion there, but then there's also an elbow joint to move the hand up and down, and then the actual little hand at the base can spin. There's a Technic pin here too to hold onto an accessory. Of course, yeah, as I said, the other hand holds onto that sword, but you can swap hands or give the mech another accessory if you wanted to. The new Combiner Mech is a lot different with the waist. This is where Zane connects, because Zane is one of the 4 builds in this set, but I really like how he folds up to create the actual armor and bulk on the mech. Like, it really feels like he's creating the shape of the chest. There is only 2 arms in this mech, so I don't really have much to compare there. Technically, I guess you could unfold one of Zane's arms if you really wanted to, but yeah, there is not nearly as much motion in the second set of arms as that first mech has. That's cool though. I like that these 2 mechs do something so different. Now, the head of the new mech is Ryu the Dragon, and I think this looks so good. It's a very silly concept to have an actual dragon as the head of a mech, but honestly it turned out fantastic. There is technically 2 heads because Zane is the actual pilot of the mech, so even though it's a little bit lower, he can turn his head and look side to side. On the original Combo Mech, it's a more traditional robotic looking brick-built head, and I wouldn't really say one is better than the other. It's just a matter of preference. They both do very different things here. Oh, also, I forgot to mention the chest, but this can open up, and this is where you can put Kai inside. He has a very spacious seating area in there. Again, I'm going to use a new figure because I don't have the original on me, but yeah, you could just plop him right in real easily, and then you close the windshield up, and then you close this part of the chest up, and now he's inside the mech, but he's also completely hidden away, so you can't see him. The shoulder blades on this mech use these large angular pieces, which I think look quite good, though once again, there's another connection point showing there's just loose ball joints right here, and they're fine, but they don't look the best. Once again, it very much feels like a compromise to allow this to combine. While on the new mech, there is nothing of the sort right there. Of course, these both separate and combine in different ways, but I can definitely say that this shoulder looks a lot better. The larger arms on the original Combo Mech are for Cole, and I think these look amazing. They have these giant drill pieces on the end, which is one of my favorite parts of this mech. Like, that theming is just incredible, and I really like how each section of this build does seem themed around each character. Cole's part has the drills, and it uses more like basic shapes, almost like rocks. Kai uses more like specialized textured pieces like this right here. Definitely gives off like sports car vibes. But then Zane's part of the mech is very smooth and spiky like ice. There's wheels on the arms, which I feel like integrate very nicely into the aesthetic of everything, and on this arm there's a sticker that looks to contain like elemental earth energy. And on the other arm, things are very similar, except this has the seat for Cole. And once again, this is the wrong minifigure, but just for demonstration purposes, here's how Cole fits in. You can close the windshield back up around him, and now he can also help pilot the mech in the arm. But then there is also an elbow joint that can also like move to the side like this. Just like with the legs, the weak point here is definitely the inner arms with these Technic holes and Technic pins. The build's still very cool, but this definitely makes it not as strong. And then of course here are the arms in the newer mech. At the shoulder, the range of motion is very similar, if not identical, but there's a more typical elbow joint here that can only move forward and back, and then the hand on the end can spin around. In place of the drills, there is an actual hand here with 3 fingers and a thumb, but there is still these blades on the side to give the mech a weapon. And this seat is of course for Sora, who connects in a very similar way to Cole. You can close the windshield up around her, and yeah, she pilots this part in a very similar way. The other arm's exactly the same up to a point, but in place of the seat for Sora, there's like this blaster on the end. The weapons here are definitely a little more abstract than the ones on the previous mech. I think drill and sword are a lot easier to understand than like these smaller blades in this blaster. They're the same concept in both being combo mechs, but they each did their own things with like what weapons were included, which characters were included. So while I do think I prefer the weapons of the other mech, I like that these are so different. Finally, one last thing to look at before I start posing the mechs and then taking them apart. Here's the back of the original mech. This connects with the head and it's the section for Jay. So he could be sat down in here to pilot the mech, and then the windshield can be closed back up. However, then he's upside down and looking upwards, so that's actually more his seat when the mech's not in mech form. There's a secondary place right behind the head where he could also sit. This set has two banners up here too, which look nice. The new Combiner Mech has the Dragon Ryu on its back, and the biggest thing here is these giant wing pieces. These look so cool and just really tie the entire thing together. And it's a smaller thing, but there's also the little tail down here too. And there's two different places you could attach a minifigure if you really wanted to. There's the saddle that's actually on Ryu's back, however, this is better when he's detached, because yeah, then the minifigure's just sticking out like this. That doesn't really make sense. But there's also two studs at the top right here, so a minifigure could sit down like that, or stand up if you'd prefer. When it comes to posing, both mechs feel very similar in terms of articulation. I think the original Combo Mech technically has more points of articulation. Like, there's more freedom on the arms, because you can swing them forward and back, but also rotate the entire section around. And it also has that additional, like, full joint at the foot that we looked at earlier. But when it comes to stability, the new version is miles ahead. You can get dynamic poses out of the old one, and honestly I quite like how I have it posed right now, but that took a lot more work to do than this one, and I think it is just the weight of everything and the lack of any friction on the feet. I'd be curious to see how it holds up if we modified it to have a little bit of rubber on the bottom of the feet. But yeah, if I had to pick one of these to like pose for a display, it would absolutely always be the new one. But yeah, if I had to pick one of these to pose for a display, it would absolutely always be the new one. I think the difference in color scheme here is quite interesting, because the color scheme is actually very similar. It's white, red, black, dark blue, and gold. The new one also adds in sand blue with Ryu on the back, but the big difference here is on the original, the colors are separated by like which of the vehicles it splits into. So the Zane parts use white, the Kai parts use red, black is kind of all throughout the build, but it's most prominent on the Cole part, and then of course the J part uses dark blue. While on the new mech, basically every single part uses every color. I don't think one of these approaches is necessarily better or worse than the other. They're just different ways of going about it, and I think both work fine. But now I think it's time, let's take these mechs apart and see how the vehicles are that actually make them up. To transform the original Combo Mech, there's a lot of different moving parts. So we'll start with the J section at the top. The first step is to remove these like wing sections from the shoulder blades. They just connect with bars on clips. We're gonna put them to the side for now. The head can move back, I believe, and then this section at the front can also move up and out of the way. And then we just pull this entire section off the back. It connects with these two bars onto those two clips. The ball joints on the shoulder blades now get attached to these ball joint sockets to be little wings. The flags can be moved up, and now we have a jet for J. For Cole's vehicle, we have to pull out these Technic parts, and that's going to detach the upper arms. And once those are removed, we can slide them back in. Of course, as always, same thing on both sides. The arms then need to be rotated and straightened out like this. The joints at the back should be bent backwards. And then the two arms connect with the Technic pins to form a full vehicle. Finally, to remove the last section, it's really weird. You kind of have to just like break the legs of the mech. You pull that off, and then you pull this off, and then you reconnect these bars to these clips right here, turn the foot around, of course, and then do the same thing on the other side. That finishes off the standalone Kai mech, and now we just have the Zane tank, which we can make by connecting these two legs together, rotating the front sections down, and there we go, it's complete. The Combiner Mech, by contrast, is a lot less steps. You could pull Zane off the front just like that and unfold him. There we go, he's basically complete. Ryu also just needs to be pulled off the back and unfolded, bend his neck back like this, and then just fold down his legs. The remaining body and legs should just be split apart at the waist. With the legs, you move them together to combine them, spin the waist section down, push these wheel sections up, move these little like golden turrets up, and then bend the feet backwards to be thrusters instead. Finally, the jet that comes from the torso is the most complex part of this model because it's the only one that involves like actually taking things apart. The hand that has the cockpit gets removed and gets attached right here at the front. The one that has the blaster gets removed and gets attached to the back to be a thruster. Then the shoulders are rotated back, moved in like this. Same thing on the other side. These upper arm sections are now like thrusters of their own, and the entire jet can be spun around like this. So now let's compare the separated parts of the two models. Starting with the legs, we have Zane's tank and Pixel's car. Funnily enough, I think these are the best vehicles in both mechs. I think the theming on Zane's is amazing, it feels very icy, and I think the gold and the black is very tasteful here. As I mentioned before, I like that there is actually two seats. You can see Zane in one, and then you can fit another minifigure in the second. But Pixel's car also looks really cool, and it's neat how the minifigures are actually hidden away. Which, by the way, now she is actually facing forward. Of the two, it's hard to say which I prefer. I think I am going to have to go with Pixel's car. As much as I love Zane, I do feel like the treads feel a little bit small here, and that's the weakest point on this vehicle. While with Pixel's car, obviously, if you know the full context of the mech, this is very clearly the mech's legs, but I feel like this one works a lot better as a standalone vehicle. If this one was just released on its own, I think people would question why its treads are so small. They are both quite good, though. I like them a lot. This one's a little hard to compare because obviously Kai's mech is significantly bigger than Zane is, but again, I think they both work well for what they're going for. Zane's mech does feel like more unique of a build just because we do get Kai mechs all the time, and I am a little partial to Zane because he is my favorite ninja, but I really don't know how to pick on this one. They are just so different. Both quite fun to move around and pose though. Kai's mech is probably the second strongest of that original set. I feel like it holds up really well. For the arms, we have Cole's car versus Sora's jet, and I really want to give it to Cole's car because I like what they were going for here, but I really just don't love how the back of this vehicle looks. These are meant to also be the arms of the vehicle, but the front section with the double drills looks amazing. I like having the stickered piece right next to where Cole's sitting, but yeah, the back of the arms just gets really thin and empty, and it works fine on a mech, but as a vehicle, it's not nearly as strong. Sora's jet, on the other hand, feels very complete, very solid. The only, very minor thing is there's ball joint sockets right here that are visible, but that's the connection point for putting things back together. Cole's car obviously has very similar things up here with the clips and these Technic pieces. I really like how the shoulders transform to give this a new shape, and even though this is the only transformation from this set that requires, taking things apart, it still feels a lot simpler to do than the transformations in the other set. And finally, for the head and the back, we have Jay's plane versus Ryu. Jay's plane is definitely the weakest part of that original set. I think it works really well as a head, and I think it's really cool how the head tucks away right here, but as just the jet on its own, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I think the wings connecting on ball joints is a little bit awkward. The seating area is nice, I like the banners, and yeah, like I said, the transformation to tuck away that head is really awesome. I think the biggest thing for me is those wing pieces. I don't love how they connect. Ryu, though, is very solid, especially for the purposes of the combiner mech. It's really impressive that this model looks so good, but still combines with the full thing. His wings are quite massive when he's on his own, but that's not a huge deal. And my favorite part is the way the neck folds up. He looks awesome when he's in this form. So now that I've had the chance to really look at these two builds together, of the two, I think I definitely prefer the new one, but I really don't think the new one could exist in the form that it is without that first set coming before it. Because Zane's Ultra Combiner Mech is a masterpiece, there is no doubt about that. The more time I spend with this set, the more I love it. It's genuinely so impressive that it manages to look good in both forms that it has, and it's stable, and it's just very fun. But I can definitely see in that set, what they learned from this one, because this set was revolutionary. I had never seen anything else like that. There was the Voltron set a few years ago, which did something somewhat similar, but it was really cool to get this for a LEGO original theme, and I still love this set to this day. But it definitely feels like with the new one, they took what worked with this one and brought it over, and then the things that didn't work as well with this one, they tried to improve, and I think they did a really great job with that. There are a couple things I'll give to the older set over the new set. I think the weapons on the original version are a lot more interesting, the drills are really cool and the sword just makes sense for Ninjago. And as I said earlier, I like how each section is more themed around every single ninja, not just in the color scheme, but also the pieces used. Like I said, the Zane section is very sharp and spiky and icy. Kai's section is very smooth and shiny like a sports car. Jay's section uses these large curved pieces, and then Cole's section is very geometric, somewhat similar to Zane's, but it doesn't have all those little spikes that Zane has. The new mech seems to opt for a more consistent design across the entire mech, and I think there's a lot of good in both of those approaches. But yeah, at the end of the day, I just feel like the new model feels a lot more complete, right? It doesn't have all that open Technic. Both the mech form and the vehicle forms feel quite complete too. It doesn't feel like one was compromised to make the other a little bit better. And it's very stable too, which is obviously a huge thing. So with all the respect and love in the world for the Ninja Ultra Combo Mech, I think Zane's Ultra Combiner Mech is just the better model. A phenomenal set. And I'm curious to see if they're ever going to do more combo mechs in the future, because it really feels like they've perfected it here. I don't even know where there is to go next. But anyway, of course, those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Which of these two sets do you think is better? Do you have the original Combo Mech? What do you think about it? And are you planning on picking up the new Zane's Ultra Combiner Mech? As I said at the beginning of this video, if you want to go check out more details about either of these sets, I'll link the full reviews in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to my channel if you're new. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!